All right, this video is going to go over the first part of the lab. A couple things I neglected to tell you in the earlier video, CloudFormation overview. When you're in this designer thing, the changes you make don't get populated back to the stack that's running. So if you want to change your template, you save it, and then you would need to use it to create a new stack. When you're in the designer, when you go to close, it's going to give you a pop-up saying, "Hey, are you sure you want to leave?" And yeah, you want to leave. So the first thing we're going to do in the lab is create a stack using a sample template without making any changes. So we're going to go to create stack. Template is ready. We're going to use a sample template. Use a sample template, and we're going to do the simple WordPress blog sample template. This is going to run, create a single server that does the database piece and the web piece, which was the same thing we did as the first part of as the first part of Lab 10. So we're going to go ahead and view this in Designer because we want to save it so we can look at it. And we want to save it as YAML. So make sure you click on YAML and then save it to local file. So we're going to look at that in a few minutes. So go ahead and open it if you want. So we're going to look at that in a few minutes. But let's go ahead and exit back out of here and actually create the stack. It takes us back out and we have to start over again because it didn't remember that we were in the stack creation process. So create stack with new resources, use a sample template, WordPress blog, click next, enter stack name, we're going to call it Rich WordPress CF for CloudFormation, and then we're going to put some parameters. These parameters do not have to match what we used before, but it'd probably be easier on us if we just make sure that we use the same thing we were using before when we can. Our database name was CNT250 WordPress. Our password, CNT250 WP password. This is the root password, which we did not set, but go ahead and set that to the same thing as the other. Our DB user, we use CNT250 underscore WP admin. Don't put an underscore. I'll show you why later. It's not going to let you put an underscore. So just for now, CNT250, no underscore, WP admin. Instance type, micro, key name, and then SSH location. So before we kick this off, let's look at these parameters: DB name, DB password, DB root, DB user, instance type, key name, and SSH location. If we go look at our template, if we look at our template parameters, we have key name, instance type, SSH location, DB name, DB user, DB password, DB root password. So basically that's all the things that we had to provide information about. So the parameters are the things that we need to tell, that we're going to ask the user about when we launch the template. So let's hit next. We need to pick our already existing lab role. Again, this is a thing we would probably have to create in our own environment if we had it. And we'll pretty much take the defaults for everything else. So hopefully this will work. We can monitor the events while it's working. So yeah, so as it's creating things, it's creating a web server security group. It created a web server. So if we go over to EC2, we should see a new instance is loading. So here's our new instance. It says initializing. So we'll wait for that instance to come up. So we'll wait for that instance to finish initializing, and then we'll go look at the template in a little more details. All right, I'm impatient, so I'm going to try to open the address. It might not be ready yet. It's not going to work over HTTP. So hey, check that out. I put HTTP. Sorry, it's not going to work over HTTPS. I put HTTP and it brought up the test page. But wasn't that supposed to load a WordPress site? It was. And one of the things we'll see is that the way the template's built, it puts our WordPress site in a WordPress directory. So there we go. I got to the WordPress site. So let's go ahead and create this info. Put some stuff in there. So for this time, I want you to put Rich's, your names, CNT 250 CF page for CloudFormation. Use the same username, password we did before. CNT 250, CNT 250. So yeah, so go ahead and install WordPress. And then there's instructions for what you should make a post to say. So that pretty much basically took these words and created a WordPress site for us, which was pretty cool. So let's go look at what this template's doing. We already talked about the parameters a little bit. Anything you need to ask the user about, that will need to be a parameter. Mappings, I don't really know exactly what that's used for, but it seemed like it was used to figure out which instance type and which AMI you should launch based on which region you're in. So I'll show you where that's referenced when I get a little further down in the template. So that was that. For resources, these are things that you need to have or need to get created. So web server security group. If we look, this is going to create a security group. It's going to allow access to port 80 and port 22. It's going to create our web server. It's going to do some stuff. We'll talk more about stuff it's going to do later in a few minutes. And then we get some outputs. And if we look at the outputs, it actually gives us the URL of the WordPress site. So if we go back to CloudFormation and click on outputs, it's like, oh, hey, here's your website URL. So I could have waited and clicked on that to get to my page. Hey, there we go, Rich's CNT 250 CF page. So the most interesting part of the template, to me, is the part where it creates the web server. If you guys remember, we pasted some stuff in the user data to get it to do what we wanted. Well, with CloudFormation, you can do these config sets to complete some actions. So if we look at what we're going to do with this CloudFormation template, we're going to do the WordPress install config set, and that consists of three parts. Install CFN, that's a CloudFormation stuff needed for the back end to work. Whatever you do, don't mess with any of those things. Install WordPress and then configure WordPress. So if we keep scrolling down, we're going to see each of those config sets is defined. Each of those activities of the config set is defined. So here's the install the CFN. It's going to create some files. So it creates this file, and then it shows what the content is. Sets the permission, sets the owner, sets the group. Same thing for this file. So basically, we're creating some text files on the on the system, and then we're configuring services. So the services section says, oh hey, for this this service manager, we want to have the CFN-HUP service enabled and running, and then here are the files that we need to create. Right here we have the install WordPress action that's happening. We're specifying which software we need to install, just like we did with our user data. We're downloading the WordPress code into the var www HTML directory. We're creating a temp setup.mysql file, which does the MySQL configuration for us. So if we look, it says create database, and it says ref DB name. This is how you reference the variable that got set in parameters. So if we go back up to parameters, we have DB name, and when we loaded the template, it asks us for a DB name. So that's how that information is used. Same thing with the user, same thing with a password, and then giving permissions, right? So this is creating a setup.mysql file. We're creating a create WordPress config file, which is basically a bash script that copies the PHP config sample file to the real file. It does some sed commands to put the database information in that config file, so that configures the database for us. We set these services up, right? We want HTTP enabled and running. This template's using MySQL instead of MariaDB, so we want MySQL enabled and running. And then we have the configure WordPress, which basically does the configuration we needed inside the database to make the WordPress site work. We take those MySQL commands we put in that setup.mysql file, and we install those commands inside the database. And this sets the working directory. Sorry, we run the create WordPress config script we created, and it sets the WordPress directory. So all that stuff was what we wanted the system to do when it comes up to configure itself. These properties are where we are going to specify some of the things we would pick when we're starting the instance. So this is the part where it did the mapping to find which which instance to use and which image. So that was the mapping part I said, right? Find and map is where it finds which one to start. This is where it tells it what security group to use. This is where it tells it what key to use. And then we have the user data is another bash script to basically kick all that other stuff off that needs to happen. So I know that's pretty much a lot of text, but basically all this stuff is there to get the information we need from the user, the parameters, right? Let's find out the information we need from the user. Let's create what needs to be created, resources, and as part of the creation, let's go ahead and do all the configuration needs to happen too. So yeah, so that's what the parts of the template are.